Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is the Sunday garden question and answer videos that I do most Sundays. The first Sunday of every month I do the subscriber Sunday video. If you have photos that you'd like to send in for that video, the email address is right here. Like I say, today is a garden question and answer. I'm answering questions from last week where people asked them below last week's video. So you can do the same here. If you have a gardening question, ask it below here, and next Sunday I will do another one of these garden question and answer videos. I'm not going to do a lot of video content, new content, over the next few weeks. My son's been in Europe for the fall, and I finally get to see him, and I'm going to spend some time with him during Christmas. I have the shade planting video that I've been hyping, almost overhyping. I will get done this week, so you'll see that. I've got my 2 soil tests back. I don't know if I'll get that done here in the next couple weeks, but that video, but it'll be up soon if not. You will see some videos though, because I shot some videos down in Alabama a couple months ago, and I've shot some at the old house. The old house is supposed to close this week, so hopefully that thing is behind me as well here before Christmas. But like I say, there's videos. They're just not necessarily moving this project forward. The back of the house is still coming off here in the next couple weeks though, if as long as weather permits. It's been raining a lot, so hoping I can get that project can go ahead and move forward. So if you follow me on Instagram, there'll eventually be a video on how the back of this house progresses. But if you want to just follow it in real time, you can follow me on Instagram. Okay, that's enough of that. Somebody from the questions from last week, somebody asked me about a Bermuda grass barrier. If you live in the South, we have common Bermuda as a weed, and then some people intentionally put in hybrid Bermuda grasses. That's what we have on most of our golf course fairways, that kind of thing. It's a great grass, especially in a golf course, because you can take a chunk out with a with a 4-iron and it recovers really quickly. It's able to repair itself very, very quickly. The problem is though, it creeps into everything, and it'll creep into mulch. It's just some weeds, if you put a mulch around it, they're just not that happy, and really a lot of organic material. They just kind of like that lawn setting, and so that prevents it. But we're not with Bermuda. Bermuda will creep right into anything. You really need a solid barrier. Some people will try to use stones or something, anything that has a gap in it at all. That Bermuda is going to root right through it and continue on. And of course, it's going to go over the top of anything and eventually root in anyway. So you're always going to have. You need to set up a solid defense line. And I know if you live further south, the rental places probably sell concrete forming machines for concrete edging, but you really do. Concrete edging is really the only way to go, and it's a solid form. Like I say, most of the rental places in the Southeast will sell a forming machine, and it's just a machine you just pull along where you want to go, but you feed it wet concrete. Anyway, there's probably videos on that, on making a solid concrete edge with a forming machine. I did it several times when I was landscaping, just because, I don't necessarily like the look of it all that much. You may want to color the concrete. That would probably make it look quite a bit better than my experience. Somebody asked me about sandy soil and being nitrogen deficient, and that's, probably almost always going to be the case. But they're using compost and mulch and improving the soil, and that's what you're just going to have to do over time. They asked me if you should put out nitrogen now. I think that would be a waste, since your soil leaches nitrogen, and the plants aren't using nitrogen. If you put it out in December, a lot of it may already be leached by the time the plants would start using it again in the spring. So I would only apply nitrogen when the plants are actively growing, and I would do it through an organic fertilizer. So whatever you're using, so that way it will take longer to break down. But you're doing the right thing, improving your soil with compost and mulch. No matter what type of soil you have, I was in that other house for 23 years. The first time I ever put a soil in the ground there, it was just, you could barely break the surface on it. And by the time I left and I was shooting those videos that you guys have seen me shoot from that other house, I dig all day long, and it was because I kept mulching it and I kept improving that soil over a long period of time. The same thing can be done with sand. Just keep applying. You just keep improving it over time, and you'll get to the point where it will leach those nutrients slower and slower. Okay, somebody asked me about saving tulips. Man, this is a hard job. But in the southeast here, it's difficult. Tulips. We don't get enough cold in the winter, so the only way to save a tulip would be to dig it out of the ground, cut it off after they've gone dormant. About 3 weeks probably after they bloom, the foliage dies back. You'd have to dig them out of the ground, cut that foliage off, cut the roots off, and then probably wrap them individually in some sort of paper or something like that to keep them from, to keep the moisture inside of them. And then, let me think, how long would that be? It would be a while. You'd have to keep them in a dry, cool, dark place. And then at some point they'd have to go back in your refrigerator and cold treat them to go back in the ground. I just don't know if all that would be worth it. It's probably doable, but I don't know if I could do it. And you're going to have to go back and check on them about every week or two and just see which ones are rotten, because one rotting in a group could potentially rot the entire group. So you'd have to cull them. You'd also have to store them in some sort of onion bag or some bag that's got holes in it, like a potato bag or something like that. Make sure it's got air, where it breathes. It's just too much work. I would probably just buy more tulips. I hate to say that, but tulips have always been disposable to me here in the southeast. I love them. Somebody asked me about getting rid of voles permanently. I have used that. I talked about I have a heart trap for that rabbit last week. I've actually used that little tiny have a heart trap for voles very effectively. You can just put peanut butter inside of it. You have to disguise it. You put it under a plant that maybe they've been working on, eating the roots on, and pile some things up around it, put some peanut butter in it. But it actually is very effective. I'm not saying we should necessarily have a heart when it comes to voles, but it's better than putting poisons in your yard. I mean, I'm a little scared about telling somebody to put poison some peanut butter and put it out in their yard someplace, because I'd be worried about some other animal getting it. But look that up, that have a heart trap for voles. I think Amazon has one. Maybe I'll link it down below. But it's a small have a heart trap that's specifically for very small rodents. But like I say, with voles, you have to kind of disguise it near the base of the plant that they've been working on and kind of cover it up a little bit. They won't come out in the open because an owl or something would grab them. So, you have to kind of cover the top on them a little bit. It works. Okay, somebody asked me about planting on the northeast side of their house. What happened is they planted during the summer when it was blasted hot in this space, and now that it's, we've gotten into fall and winter, it's a very shady spot. This is the most difficult spot. In the southeast United States, the sun goes past us to the north in the middle for about 6 weeks in the summertime. And it makes the north side of our house, if our houses face south, then the back of our house, with the entire length of our houses, the north side becomes a cooker. My deck on that other house was on the north side. It was unusable for about 6 weeks every year. It needed some sort of cover on it. Even then, I think it would have been too hot. But it's a very difficult place to landscape, and you end up with plants in the shade about 9 months out of the year. And I mean shade, because the house is just shading them the whole time. And then for about maybe 6 or 8 weeks, the sun comes over and it just torches that space. Yes, it will be a problem. If you've planted full sun things, especially like foliage color things like Allura petalum that require sun all the time to keep them purple, that will be an issue. I would just wait it out, see what, some of the plants may get thinner than they would otherwise. I'm going to tell you right now, native plants work really well in those conditions. So for me, that, a small redbud tree or a dogwood tree or, oak leaf hydrangeas work well in that kind of changeable shade to sun conditions. A lot of those plants will work. So, maybe native plants for that northeast corner. Okay, somebody asked me about a eucalyptus for arranging. There are a lot of different eucalyptus varieties, but Eucalyptus guni, I've never known how to pronounce that one, can be done from seed. It's a fast growing one that will grow in zone 8 where you're growing. And most of them have pretty nice foliage, but I know that one is you got 2 problems in zone 8. You got to make sure it's hardy. A lot of the eucalyptus varieties probably aren't going to be winter hardy every winter in zone 8. The other thing with the eucalyptus is you have to know it's a tree. Typically you're going to buy them in a little 1-gallon pot like this in a perennial section in some garden center. And then the next thing you know, and somebody plants it near their house, and next thing you know, it's 25 feet tall. So keep that in mind. Eucalyptus is going to get big, really big, and faster than you're going to be able to control it. Like in your mind, you're going to be, I'll just keep it 6 feet. No, you're not. Somebody asked me about planting apples in clay in Oklahoma, and I know that clay in Oklahoma is really tough. I've seen videos on it. I mean, I know it's really difficult to dig in, but they wanted to plant their apple trees in raised beds and how that would affect them later. I would not advise planting trees in a lot of organic material in raised beds like that. I think you really have to try to dig the proper hole, and then if you can find pine bark soil conditioner, use that. Maybe use a fork and try to fork some of that clay out further from the trees. Do mound them up some. I mean, I don't want you to plant them flush with that clay, but mound them up some, but I would not put them in raised beds. I really do think that using the wrong soil amendment is worse than using no soil amendment. Okay, so keep that in mind. I'd rather use, if you have clay soils, if you can find pine bark soil conditioner, use that. If you can't, then use just the clay that's there and just try to break it up with a fork or something like that, rather than use the wrong thing. Also, I get these questions a lot. I'm about to plant 50 of something, or I'm about to plant 100 of something. What's the best way to do it? The best way to do it is go buy 1 of something, or 2 of something, or 3 of something, and then plant them and see how it goes for a season. If you have a tricky spot to plant, don't go buy 50 or 100 plants and put them in the ground and have that kind of, that's the kind of thing that ruins gardening for people and really takes away any joy that you'd ever have from it. I highly recommend. There's a few spots in this yard. I don't know how the sun's going to play out here all year long. I don't know where the sun hits every day of the year. I'm going to plant some things in wrong spaces. I'm not going to go crazy and plant 30 of something in here until I kind of know, what I'm dealing with in that way. I don't know how the plants are going to respond to the soil. It looks good, but I don't know. And so just be cautious with that. Anytime you're going to throw potentially thousands of dollars at something, go get 1 of them or 2 of them and see how it goes. Live with them for a season. Make sure it's even the plant that you want, because it may be that you just kind of regret it just from you liked it more in the pot than you did in the ground. Okay, somebody asked me about doing a flagstone path or a patio in the wintertime. I don't think there's any problem with it at all. Mortar can be an issue, below certain temperatures, but they're doing brick buildings all around here. I won't use a lot of mortar here, so obviously a patio or path with no mortar, it doesn't matter kind of when you do it. It may matter more the further north you go, because the soils can freeze, and then that thawing in the spring could potentially move things around a little bit. But down here in the south, I don't think it matters when you do a flagstone path or patio. In fact, I would choose, when I landscaped, a lot of times, if it was a job where I was too busy at the time to get everything done, maybe I would have done the planting earlier in the fall and just told the customer, hey, let's just do this part of the job now, and then I'll come back in January when we have more time and do retaining walls and paths and patios and that kind of thing. Somebody asked me why it was so difficult to grow under a large oak, and I don't think it has anything to do with a large oak. I think it has to do with any established plant. If you try to plant plants near another established plant, the established plant is always going to win. It's amazing to me that if you plant 20 things together, and it can include an oak or a maple or whatever it is, if you plant 20 things together and they just grow up together in time, they really do a good job of playing nicely with one another. But an old established plant is very good at beating up on your newly planted plants. And so what all that means is you're kind of more responsible for I got a dog over here, for newly planted things for a little while longer. So I planted around the willow oak in my front yard at that other house. Things I was planting around that oak, I was definitely more conscious of watering. And I think you probably have to go out 2 years or so of monitoring things that you plant around established plants, or putting in drip irrigation and just knowing that those plants are going to need time to become competitive with an established tree. Somebody asked me about using hardwood in the place of pine bark soil conditioner, because they can't find pine bark soil conditioner where they are, which is what I recommend for mixing into clay. No, don't use a hardwood. But if you can find mini nuggets, I don't know if I've said this before, but you know, when you go to one of the box stores, they're going to have either pine bark soil conditioner, which is going to be really fine ground up pine bark, or then they may have pine bark mini nuggets or pine bark nuggets. Nuggets are going to be, you know, as much as 3 inches across. Mini nuggets might be 1.5 inches. Mini nuggets are fine. If you find that the stuff is too chunky, you can, you know, break them up a little bit. But if you can find pine bark mini nuggets, just use that instead. Or again, like I said earlier, use nothing at all. And I think that's it. Somebody asked me about, one other question I had was about planting on slopes and dealing with, you know, plants on slopes, that it's, you know, really, really difficult. Unfortunately, it definitely is going to require irrigation. It's definitely going to be, it's going to require patience, and it's going to require irrigation. You really do need to run drip irrigation. Remember, when you have a sloped space, water is going to be carried downhill by gravity, so you need to irrigate above your plants, any row of plants that you have. And then getting something, you know, for mulch wise, if you have pine straw in your area, I'd probably use pine straw on a slope. This hardwood mulch or these wood chips right here would definitely try to float out of there. So that would be super frustrating. Definitely don't use weed control fabric, because it'll swoop right off of that weed control fabric. But like I say, pine straw for mulch, and maybe I'll show some, I'll do some videos. If I can find, there are some tough lots in this neighborhood I'm in. They used every square inch of this place. And there are some people who have done a good job in here, I've noticed, on planting on slopes. So I'll include a couple of those tour videos in the spring. I'll seek out ones that are particularly tough slopes on them. So, okay, I think that's it for this week. I think that was literally every question that I got from last week's video. So if you have any gardening questions, ask them down below. And thanks again for watching.